I'll use one pebble for lots of wonderful things. One is for this amazing congregation who is willing to step up and support the incredible work that we do. This is the end of my stewardship speech that I got pulled away from. But for the incredible work that we do. And on that note, I'm also going to drop this pebble and say thank you from Freedom University for including us in the 50-50 last month. They are so appreciative of the work that we do, not only in just providing monetary support, but for those of us who volunteer and those people who are willing to step out and say what is happening with these detentions is wrong. And if I steal your thunder, I apologize. But to our Dave Dunn, who went with others down this week to say we cannot expand these detention centers, this insanity has to stop. And Jennifer, thank you too. I know you were there. Jonathan told me yesterday. So thank you all. Thank this congregation. Continue to understand that the work we do matters. UUMAN does matter.
A final pebble for all those joys and sorrows too tender to escape the folds of our hearts. Let's keep each other and the world in our thoughts in the coming week. Titled Herbology by Stephen Herod Boner. When I was 34, I became quite ill with severe abdominal cramping. The doctors didn't know what it was. I met a local herbalist, and she mentioned that a certain plant growing in the forest around my house was good for my condition. The doctors wanted to do exploratory surgery, but instead I ate some of the plant. The pain was about half as severe the next time it happened, and the next time about half again, until finally it just went away. After that, I began to take control over my own health. It was a perennial herb. I just dug up the root and began eating it. It's got a spicy, celery-like taste. Not only did I feel my body getting better, but I could feel inside some living entity that cared about me. It's difficult to explain because it's not something we generally talk about in the West. After I became an herbalist, I met a 28-year-old woman whose periods were extremely irregular, with heavy cramping and bleeding, and her hands were always cold. I could see that her whole body was closed off, curled in on itself. Her fingernails were chewed back deeply, as if she were eating herself alive. I told her there was a plant I thought she should meet. We went for a walk through a pine forest, and when she saw the plant at the edge of a stream, a kind of force drew the woman and the plant together. She spent a long time with it, then said a prayer and asked for help. She dug up the root, which has a beautiful smell. On the walk back, she held it close to her. She was carrying herself differently. The healing had started. She took a tincture made from the root, and within a month, her period was normalized. When you use a living medicine and get well, you feel that the world is alive and aware and wants to help you. People often talk about saving the earth, but how many times have you experienced the earth saving you?
Thank you, Alex. Just a reminder, I keep half a dozen copies of the sermon outside if you want to pick one up, because I know some people have problems hearing. If you pick one up before the service, you can read along. I'm not going to make this announcement every week, but I usually put them out there. So anyway, this morning, the essence of everything. Sounds like a lofty title for a sermon. You might be thinking that after this sermon, you'll never have to come back here again. You'll never have to take an adult RE class or an RE class, because obviously you'll know the essence of everything. Something that has eluded all of humanity throughout all of world history, yet somehow your minister has figured it out. And he's about to let you in on the secret. We'll see about that. But first, Universe, Part 1. Isaac Newton had a problem. He wanted to describe the universe, beginning with planetary motion, but he couldn't do it. He didn't have the mathematical language to do it. So he invented that language. It's the language we now call calculus. That language breaks things down into smaller and smaller and smaller components, building blocks. And the precise descriptions of these smallest components are then added together, summarized over the whole to describe the whole. It's brilliant, actually, to describe something by first breaking it down to its smallest components. The only problem is that this calculus, this breaking down, breaks down itself when we start looking at subatomic particles. Austrian physicist Friedrich Capra says, subatomic particles have no meaning as isolated entities. Quantum theory shows that we cannot decompose the world into independently existing smallest units. As we penetrate into the matter, nature does not show us any isolated basic building blocks. Friedrich Capra. The essence of the subatomic world, described by quantum theory, is something other than that described by Isaac Newton's reductive mindset. Earth, Part 1. Why is this plant here? A new plant will appear in an ecosystem when that ecosystem is changed in some way. And that change in the ecosystem might cause some plants to perish, others to flourish, and for new plants to appear that had not been there before. And let's not label this change as good or bad, positive or negative. It's just a change. It simply is. The entrance of your very self into the ecosystem is part of a change in that ecosystem. Yet again, why is this plant here? Theology, Part 1. Traditional Torah study is done in what is called a shavruta, generally two people going through the text together. Together, they challenge each other, push each other into the text. They explain, they argue with one another, trying to convince the other that their interpretation of the text is the correct one. We might consider that to be an obviously practical way to examine the Torah or any text. Yet might there be a less obvious reason? Might such study lead to a less obvious end? UUMAN, Part 1. What brought you here? What brought you to church today? And I'm not talking about a vehicle. What brought you to church today? Why are you here? Is it because you wanted to hear a sermon? Or because maybe you wanted to hear Alex play the piano? Or perhaps just stroll on our beautiful grounds and look at our garden? Theoretically, if you, Alex, and I were the only ones here today, you could do all of those things. Hear a sermon, listen to Alex play, and go take a stroll on our campus and look at our beautiful garden. Is that enough to keep you coming back week after week? Universe, Part 2. Generally speaking, quantum entanglement is a theory proven by experimentation again and again and again that shows that for some reason, subatomic particles interact with one another even when separated by vast distances. As a relative example, it's like me picking up our chalice and let's say I rotate it clockwise, and that act causes the chalice at UUCA in Atlanta to begin turning counterclockwise on its own. That, at the subatomic level, has been proven to happen again and again and again. It's called quantum entanglement. Again, Austrian physicist Friedrich Capra says, subatomic particles have no meaning as isolated entities, but can only be understood as interconnections. Quantum theory thus reveals a basic oneness of the universe, where everything appears as a complicated web of relations between the various parts of the whole. Friedrich Capra. Earth, Part 2. Why is this plant here? Herbologist Stephen Herod Buhner says, I found that if people are ill, the plants that they need are almost always growing in their vicinity. I've watched plant populations change around me in places I've lived for some 30 years, and they seem to shift in response to the changes in my own disease complexes. This sounds airy-fairy to the Western reductive mindset, but people have been talking about this, commenting on it since the 4th century BC. Plant populations rise and fall according to the needs of the ecosystem in which they grow. And that includes the animal life there. And that includes us. Stephen Buhner. Interestingly, many of these plants are considered invasive. Did you know that kudzu can be used to cure a headache? Privet leaves and bark can help treat diarrhea, stomach ulcers, chronic bowel problems. Based upon the quantities of these plants in our community, I'd guess that a lot of us seem to be suffering from problems at both ends, so to speak. Maybe nature isn't so cold and uncaring after all. Maybe, perhaps more often than not, she's trying to help us, yet we're too busy to take notice. Maybe she's saying, hey, you don't seem to understand. You're part of our team. Theology, Part 2. Regarding the Shavruta, where the pair studies the Torah together, learning from one another, challenging one another. Although we might consider this to be a practical way to study the Torah or any text, might there be a less obvious reason leading to a less obvious end? Rabbi Joshua Boedinger says, even though the focus of the study is the sacred text open before them, It is almost as if the text is an excuse for the two learners to come together and to be open to one another. Or, he continues, we could say that the text is revealed in how it is manifest in the very relationship of the Shabruta partnership. Interesting. The text is revealed in how it is made manifest in the very relationship of the Shabruta partnership. UUMAN, Part 2. Former UUA president, the Reverend Peter Morales, says, the best predictor of whether somebody will stay in a congregation is the number of relationships they make in the first 6 months. So, ultimately, Newton's reductive mindset, where things are reduced to isolated entities, can't describe the mysterious yet basic oneness of the universe. And you may have heard it suggested during times of trouble or crisis to look for the helpers. Why is that plant here? Perhaps nature understands and cares about our connection, a bond with us, of which we are unaware, and nature wants to help. Perhaps when we gather together after the service to discuss the service, to discuss a topic during adult enrichment or during religious education, or even during coffee and conversation, perhaps it isn't the material being covered that is important. Perhaps the material is merely an excuse for something to be more deeply essential, to be revealed. Something essential that can't be revealed when you're on your own. Perhaps 14th century Catholic Christian mystic theologian Meister Eckhart was correct when he said, the essence of everything is relationship.
In an effort to fulfill and further the vision and mission of this congregation, we ask that our members and friends bring forth and share their many and varied gifts. With this, we will now take the offering. You may also use the Givelify app.
We accept this sacred offering generously given by our beloved members and friends, and may we use it wisely and judiciously in service of our mission and vision. Thank you.
Everything is Waiting for You by David White. Your great mistake is to act the drama as if you were alone, as if life were a progressive and cunning crime with no witness to the tiny hidden transgressions. To feel abandoned is to deny the intimacy of your surroundings. Surely even you at times have felt the grand array, the swelling presence, and the chorus crowding out your solo voice. You must note the way the soap dish enables you, or the window latch grants you freedom. Alertness is the hidden discipline of familiarity. The stairs are your mentor of things to come. The doors have always been there to frighten you and invite you. And the tiny speaker in the phone is your dream ladder to divinity. Put down the weight of your aloneness and ease into the conversation. The kettle is singing even as it pours you a drink. The cooking pots have left their arrogant aloofness and seen the good in you at last. All the birds and creatures of the world are unutterably themselves. Everything is waiting for you. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again.
Thank you, Kurt. He said earlier that the reason it goes out is because the flame needs air to stay lit. I'm like, you're a very smart kid. Anyway, what is it that calls you here, that calls you onward, that calls you inward, that leads you homeward? Your great mistake is to act the drama as if you were alone. Surely even you at times have felt the grand array, the swelling presence in the chorus crowding out your solo voice. The essence of everything is relationship. Go in peace. The world is waiting for you.